Hello friends, today we'll look into another item from Effective Java. This is regarding design method signatures carefully. This item is basically a collection of different rules and recommendations on designing method signatures. So the first rule is choose method names carefully. When we are naming method names, they should be consistent with our current class, package and the project. So we may tend to use different naming conventions, but we should respect the current class or the package and the project naming conventions. For example, in the JDK ArrayList class, we have elemented. So here, this is basically a query method which accepts an array and an index. So we have element data. So this is also at another query method. So as we can see, so this class is following some pattern in query methods. Right? We have a get here. So in this whole class, we can see get method only used when we are directly getting the elements at a particular index as a only parameter. So it's very important to understand the current class and its naming conventions. Moving on, don't go overboard in providing convenience methods. Right. So every class which we design has a single responsibility, and to achieve that we have multiple actions which are basically the methods. So every method which we define in a class should pull its weight. So we should be able to say that what is the purpose of this method. So it should have a defined purpose, and it is very much applicable to interfaces. As you can see in the list interface, so we have different methods and they have their own purpose, right? Contains and all, add. So we should be able to say the purpose of each method in your class. And in some cases, you may have some implementation which is duplicated across the methods. In those cases, you may want to create a shorthand methods, but you should be sure whether we really require shorthand methods. And if you are in doubt, better to leave it as it is. Moving on, avoid long parameter lists. This is important. So always try to have max of 4 or less than 4 number of parameters for your Java methods. Having more number of parameters creates confusion for the consumer of the API, and it creates more confusion if you have a consecutive same data type of the parameters. Although the IDEs will help you in identifying the different order and the type, but still uh, you may miss the type and compiler may not complain about it, and you may get different behavior during runtime. So better to avoid more than 4 number of parameters. Let's take example of this class health tracker. So here I have different parameters here. Basically this will try to calculate the calories burned depending on different actions by the user, like steps of walking and the running distance, cycling distance, etc. So if you see here this method, steps, running distance, cycling, so all are integer types. You may have only this method, but in some cases user may have only few of the parameters to be set. So at a user might walk on a single day, user may just walk, right? In those cases you may want to just set the steps, so others may remain 0. So this kind of approach, which we call as method chaining, can avoid some confusion to the consumer of the API, where he can set only the parameters he wants to set. So this is more readable and usable. Similarly for steps and running distance, right? Here we have only 2 parameters. Finally, if he has 3, so he can set all the parameters. So this is one of the approach to avoid or to make it more readable when we have more number of parameters. So another approach is, instead of providing all the parameters in the method itself, we can have a class which can define those parameters, and we can set these parameters in this class. For example, here activity class has all the parameters, so we can set all the parameters in the class and provide the instance of the object as an input to the method, and which does the same operations. So this is another approach. So the third approach, which is a combination of the first two, which adopts the builder kind of a pattern. For example, the you may provide the inputs like this: steps, run, and cycling. So this is more readable, where uh, the consumer can provide the input along with the parameter name itself, and this will avoid the confusion of the different types or order of the parameters. And you can see this is more readable. Readability is more important in the code. So, and finally we call execute method, uh, which does the final operation on those parameters. Moving on to the next rule, which is regarding the for parameter types favor interfaces over classes. This is at another important recommendation when you are designing your classes. Uh, so the input parameters to the methods should be of type interface. Let's say, for example, if your method is taking an input as a map, instead of saying a hash map, you can specify it as a map. So the advantage of this coding to interface is the consumers of the API can can call your method using different implementations of the map interface. Right? It could be hash map, concurrent hash map, any other tree map, or any other map interface. So if you instead of this, if you have designed your method with hash map as an input, specified the concrete class as an input, then your consumers will be limited to hash map, or they have to convert their implementation of map into hash map before calling your method. So it is better to code to interfaces. Finally, the final rule is prefer two element enum types to boolean parameters. So this is another important observation. So when we are passing the booleans as an input to a method, so we have to document it, what the true means and what the false value means, right? So instead of that, if you create a enum, like for example in this case I have an enum walk or run, right? So this is very explicit way of saying that what value represents, what is its uh, understanding, the domain understanding of this particular value. So I can perform different operations by just comparing the value of the enum. Like if it is walking, I can do some operation. If it is run, so I can do some operations here. And tomorrow if I want add another value here, I can add it easily. And if I want to define some methods over the enum, I can do it and refactor the internal methods, right? So without affecting the consumers of the API, right? If I add another value here, it will not affect the consumers of the API. It will not break their code, right? For Boolean, it is not the case. Boolean, it can have only max of two values, and that should be very much documented. So this is another important tool for designing method signatures. And yeah, so we saw about different aspects of method naming, method names, shorthand methods, how to avoid more shorthand methods, avoid long parameter lists, and code to interface, and prefer enums rather than Boolean parameters. I hope this is useful, and I will see you in the next attempt. Thank you.